Hey friends, full reactions in the link in the description below, so pause, leave a like, really helps with the channel, subscribe, and come back after you watch the reaction for the discussion. Give you some time to do that. Review and commentary starting in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let's go. What a fun way to end the season. It basically just set up the season to come, season 4, not so much wrapping up season 3, but yeah, I'm very, very happy that I don't have to wait for the next season since I started so late. I think those of you who are caught up are now watching season 5, and we got to meet the big three. And what's interesting to me is Amajiki, Najira, and Mirio all didn't place in their second year of the sports festival, and I'm guessing they did in their third year. And I'm wondering why Deku didn't watch the other years' like sports festivals this time around, because I feel like it's unlikely that they're regarded as the big three if they didn't finish really high in this year's competition. So what does that mean for year one's big three? Because right now, the ones at the top are Todoroki, Bakugo, and I think Deku. But I feel like certain breakthroughs with your quirk can send you skyrocketing to the top of the group. And I'd say the two students from 1A who are struggling to use their quirk the most at the moment are Aoyama and Tokoyami. And with Aoyama and his stomach aches, I don't know if that's something you can completely train away. And so I'm not sure if he can ever overcome that. And I guess Uraraka is struggling with making herself float without hurling, so she could be added to that group too. But I feel like Aoyama and Uraraka, even if they're both able to overcome that limit, I don't know how much stronger they could possibly get. So I don't know if it would propel them into the big three. So Tokoyami, on the other hand, if he can learn to control the rampaging version of Dark Shadow, or somehow make it impervious to light, that could very well make him unstoppable. And I don't know whose place he would take in the big three. Maybe it'll be a big four in that case. And I feel like Tenya, he's kind of in no man's land because it feels like several other characters might already have caught up to him in speed. So what else does he have? But being the speed guy, I feel like he absolutely needs a new level of speed. Maybe he can change his engine, so to speak. I don't know. Something that would allow him to use Recipro more often or constantly use it. That would be pretty cool. Anyway, onto the actual fight between Mirio and all the students. Todoroki actually stayed out, but I feel like he would have been taken out just as easily by Mirio too, because Deku and Todoroki fought pretty evenly in the sports festival, and I think they're probably still somewhat close, and yet Mirio demolished Deku with that eye poke ultimate move. Oh man. But yeah, in the previous episode, I was saying that I understand how letting things slip through Mirio might make him essentially have an impenetrable defense, but I wasn't sure how good his offense would be. But we learned how exactly his quirk works this time, and that put to bed any of my reservations, because he can change what angle he faces or whatever to then fly out in the direction that he wants to. That's so ridiculous. And I mean, that added momentum can definitely add a lot of power to his strikes. And I would think also a lot of strain to his arms and legs too, because if you're traveling that fast and you land a blow, the vibrations through the stress on your bones is going to be a lot. So he needed to build up his body well to be able to do this at a high level. And I'm actually very curious. I wonder if Kirishima just hadn't made himself hard yet, or if Mirio somehow punched through his quirk to still injure him despite being hard, because that would be something else. Um, and then he would actually have to pay attention to how hard he's hitting everybody to make sure he doesn't overpower. Like some of the characters can obviously take more damage than the others, so he might have actually had to um, adjust his power level, right? But yeah, we learned that when Muriel uses his quirk, everything passes through his body, including light, vibrations, sound. So it's interesting he says light too, because the light doesn't pass through his eyes, but then if light passes through him, why can we still see him? I'm not sure, um, but when he's falling, he just has that sensation of falling. If he invisibilizes his whole body, can't see, touch, smell, breathe, even, that's so ridiculous and actually quite terrifying. But yeah, what's interesting is that he still maintains his mass, otherwise he wouldn't fall into the ground due to the force of gravity. But for him to use his quirk effectively, he definitely needed to build on his anticipation, because he has no cues as to what's going to happen when he comes back out from underground. Like, he has to predict what the situation will be by the next time he surfaces, which can just be 1 or 2 seconds at times, but still, like, you need to think ahead because he has no idea what's happening above ground. I mean, thankfully, he can also do a lot of trial and error since he can't be hit. But I guess my question is, how did Mirio pass the entrance exam in like a couple years ago if he had such poor control over his quirk? And I'm guessing Aizawa wasn't his homeroom teacher, or he would have expelled him for having no promise, since he loves expelling people. But yeah, the fact that Mirio was born with a quirk that is so hard to master is really quite something. He didn't figure it out for years, and you'd think that as a child, when your brain is best at learning how to do new things, that would be the time he learned how to harness his power. But somehow, between his second year sports festival and now, in just over a year, he's suddenly become so much more proficient. It's like something just clicked for him. And yeah, made him the hero that's closest to number one, meaning he could actually pose quite a big of threat to Endeavor at this moment, right? And I felt bad for some of 1A in this episode. Obviously, they were all punched in the gut really hard. I get the feeling some of them probably vomited after that. And Jiro, Jiro was so scandalized by seeing Mirio naked, and the second time she was like point blank with him behind her. So uh, we've seen her try to cover up Yaoyorozu multiple times before. She seems easily scandalized, maybe, but none of the other students seemed too bothered by Mirio's nudity, just surprised. Deku, meanwhile, still went ahead and tried to attack Mirio, and Mirio just powered his way through everybody. And I'm actually curious now that we know more about Mirio's quirk, how exactly he showed up to see Deku when Deku was taking out the trash. Because his face, he stuck his face out of a wall. So were his feet on the ground on the other side of the wall? But then how would he speak? Because half of his torso would be invisible, right? I mean, the only part facing outward would be here, and then there's a gap, which means he can't breathe. He said that like his lungs can't, like his air just passes through his lungs. So even if it's a like small wall and his lungs are fine, and his face is fine, there's still a gap in the breathing tube that doesn't connect because he's permeated through this wall. So I'm not trying to poke holes in his quirk. It's just a lot of things to think about. Um, but yeah, there's I feel like I'm overthinking this, but maybe what if it's actually like a really thick wall? Was his face the only thing sticking out, and the rest of his body was just hanging in nothingness? Because that definitely seems like it was the case when he came up from the ground with only his face showing, like upwards. So does this mean also that his face was like cut off from the side? So like everything in front of him was solid and everything behind him was with permeation was activated? Otherwise, he would have shot up, right? So okay, I know I feel like I'm not explaining what I'm thinking too well, but okay. So when he's looking up, this part of his face, everything in front of this part is solid, and everything behind is has permeation activated. So does that technically mean that part of his brain was touching the ground? Cause yeah, right? There's no other way to think. It's gross, but it's so weird. And actually, now that I think about it, would his quirk be good for like performing surgery? Like he's clearly not able to take objects with him since his clothes disappear, but he could theoretically like put his hands inside someone without cutting them open. And on that note, what if he makes someone invisible? What if he makes himself permeating inside somebody and then deactivates his quirk? In last week's commentary, I wondered if he would just displace whatever was inside that person and just kill them. But it sounds like he would just fly out of them instead. Like that's, I guess he would be like Vision in Civil War going into Ant-Man or something. Except for he would just launch out once he made himself visible. Not visible, you know what I mean. Also, what happens if he's underground and he turns off the quirk in just parts of his body? I guess if he made his upper half solid again, and the rest of his body would just get pulled up with it. But what if he just stopped using permeation like in the tip of his finger? Wouldn't would that be a good way to control which way he would pop out? Just like point in the way you want to go, and you get pulled sort of that way. I don't know. But anyway, his quirk is super fascinating, and outside of actually being able to do it in real life, I don't think there's any way we're getting answers to all these questions. But it's fun to think about. But yeah, the grossest thing for me is the fact that if only part of his body is showing, that means his inner organs are technically touching the surface he's resting on, like with the brain I mentioned earlier. Anyway, I'll just choose not to think about that in the future. But yeah, actually, I'm actually very. I think we should all be very happy that it was Mirio who got this quirk and not Mineta. Imagine how easy it would be for him to peep on women with that quirk. Yikes. But yeah, Mirio definitely has the energy to be the number one hero, though. His ability to lighten the mood, always keeps smiling. Something about his joy for all this is just infectious. And it would have been very interesting to see him wield One for All as well. Um, because, I mean, he has the ultimate defense, and if he added One for All to that, he would have the ultimate offense. He'd be basically invincible. Um, and I'm actually very curious why All for One never tried to steal his quirk, because he's clearly been in the spotlight. Maybe it's too hard to use. I guess that could be it. Stealing the quirk would just make it very, very difficult. It would be too hard to use, essentially. Yeah. Though, I mean, All for One has been he's been around for forever. Like he can live essentially forever. So why not get something that can be that useful? I don't know. Anyway, I was kind of looking forward to seeing Nejira and Amajiki's quirks too, but sadly we didn't get to it. I'm guessing we'll be in for some cool reveals for their quirks down the line instead. It sounded like Amajiki has been friends with Mirio since they were very young, so that's cool to see. And I'll look forward to learning more about their relationship eventually. Speaking of Amajiki, though, he has some real intense energy about him, but it turns out it was like social anxiety or something. And oh no, he tried to see everybody's as potatoes. It's kind of cute and also really sad, though. It's really sad, mostly sad. Nejire, meanwhile, very bubbly, had so many questions and and then she didn't give anybody a chance to answer them. I'm actually very curious about some of the questions she asked because, I mean, she should be doing this commentary. I feel like. Um, so yeah, very cute, but also seems like a nightmare to try to have a real conversation with because she'll just constantly cut you off and just keep talking and talking and talking and asking questions. Um, or maybe she's just this way when meeting new people and you can actually talk more normally with her later on. But yeah, she was touching Mina's horns though. That was another part of the episode where I was feeling bad for Class 1A because poor Mina, she was just like, stop touching it. I don't know, does it tickle? Because she was blushing, or maybe they're like really sensitive. And I've never actually thought too much about the fact that she has horns. It's just part of her character design that I never like took in and like took note of. Um, so I don't know. They don't seem to serve any obvious purpose other than just being a part of how she looks. Are they somehow vestigial horns? Maybe one of her parents has horns, and that was part of their quirk, but she has a different quirk now. But they kept the horns anyway. I don't know. But yeah, the big three are all super eccentric, and it was a joy watching them all. Mirio wanted to introduce Deku to Sir, and we see him later with that blue hero girl. So clearly setting up more for season 4. Maybe that's where Deku does his work study. And I think Mirio was saying that his work study helped him attain this new control over his power. So I'm looking forward to seeing what exactly this Sir guy is like. Final thing was just Overhaul and Shigaraki meeting. Seems like a team up of villains. Twice seemed to say that Overhaul was a part of some group. I already forgot its name. So maybe he has a league of like plague doctor villains with those beak type masks. I don't know. He'll probably be a big villain next season. It'll be interesting to see. Oh, and we had Bakugo yelling at everybody to hand him their trash. Hand it over! He's freaking hilarious. Anyway, great episode. Honestly, even though there was nothing like super cool or amazingly emotional, it was just endlessly funny and interesting. So I'm going to give this episode a 10. But yeah, leave a like, guys, subscribe, and power! Thanks for watching. Bye, friends.